ladies and gentlemen, for this next section of the Daily Cannon. We got somebody in the building all the way from, well, originally from D.C.,
Yeah.
by the way of
Chi-Town.
Chi-Town now. I mean, and obviously spent some time in New York.
Yeah.
And out here, telling his story. And has a very remarkable and compelling story.
Thank you.
Did you know that, obviously the Source magazine was considered the hip hop Bible for so long, really like the Rolling Stone of rap. And it was created by a young white dude from Harvard
That's right.
who went on to be one of the most powerful men in hip hop and has some amazing stories. We're joined with the one and only now CEO of Breakbeat Media, Dave Mays, man. Welcome. And he's joined by his lovely fiance on the couch over there as well, who is also one of the executives at Breakbeat, Miss Brett Jeffries. So welcome, y'all. Thanks for being here today. How you feeling?
Feeling great, man. Happy to be here. Good to see you.
We live on Twitch, you know what I mean?
All right.
And I see it's so much, man, that I want to discuss with you, but I really want to dive into your personal story, man. I think it's compelling, but even the stuff that the new media that you guys have put together now with Breakbeat, where a lot of people don't know, like, everyone from like the funny Marcos to the Don't Call Me White Girls to so much stuff that you just kind of been keeping your ear to the streets, even in this new media spot, to where now you guys, even from the Bill Bellamy podcast, is on Breakbeat, as well as the Collect Calls with Suge Knight, man. So Breakbeat is doing big things, man. So congratulations on that. Tell me about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is something I've been thinking about for a while. I think that there's a void out here for a network that represents the hip hop community and the culture in a diversified but authentic way. So I launched this with my partner Kendrick Ashton about 2 years ago, the first hip hop podcast network. So some of the names you mentioned, people like Don't Call Me White Girl, or Funny Marco, Bubba Dub also is doing his thing with Breakbeat now. These are kind of like, for anyone that knows the Source, you might know about Unsigned Hype, which was the column where we discovered so many talent, before they blew up, from Biggie to DMX and Common and Mobb Deep and Eminem and so on. But so these are kind of like the unsigned hypes of Breakbeat. Are they're not rappers, but these are incredible talents that I have been following. Saw this opportunity to create a network that really, again, kind of brings together these different personalities and voices and perspectives in a really authentic way. So yeah, they're kind of the funny Marcos, the Don't Call Me White Girl. They're like my unsigned hypes of Breakbeat.
And they obviously, both of them are like, blowing up and taking off in a big way. And I sometimes people give me credit, which I don't like to take credit for, but like for being a discoverer of talent or a curator. But I would say I've created platforms for talent to kind of shine and do their thing. But interestingly enough, you're one of the pioneers of that. I mean, the Source started off, you got Breakbeat now, but the Source started off as literally a newsletter when you were at Harvard, man. I mean, you tell me about that. I mean, a Jewish kid from D.C., parents got him the ability to be at one of the most prestigious institutions in the world in Boston, and you were like, yo, I'm about to be on my hip-hop vibe in the golden era of hip-hop. This was like 88, right?
Yeah, 86 I got there as a freshman and
Wow.
at Harvard. And I was...
What was your major? Like, what were...
Well, my major ended up being government. I did get my bachelor's in government.
Okay.
But when I got there, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But honestly, it was like a culture shock hitting the Harvard campus, because I knew, it was Harvard and it was a great school, but I didn't really think about the social life and the people.
Right.
And they were very different from the people that I had grown up with in D.C. and my friends there. So, I was just trying to figure out how I could fit in or find something that really, appealed to me. And I ended up joining the radio station and was able to create a hip hop radio show on Harvard station that was playing almost all classical music.
Wow. So did you created the first hip hop station at Harvard?
First hip hop radio show was called Street Beat. Myself and another student had met there, John Schechter, and Street Beat became like the number one hip hop show in Boston. You know, people all around Boston would tune in late on Friday night and call in, and I was like, a big thing for me to make it the top show.
That's dope.
And that kind of led to the creation of The Source. I was trying to sell sponsors of my radio show and make a little money, on commission. Yeah. And a lot of the businesses around town would laugh at me like, man, nobody's listening to a hip hop show on Harvard station. Get out of here. And I knew I had all these listeners. So I started building up a mailing list to try to prove to advertisers my audience was. And then just listening to all the fans wanting to know information. Back then, there was just no information. People, there was a lot of hip hop fans because, you had Run DMC and Grandmaster Flash, Sugar Hill Gang had created an audience, but there was no information. And they always wanted to know when's the new Public Enemy album coming out, who produced this song or that. And that was like the inspiration. Like, let me create a newsletter and give out information to the fans on what's going on in the hip hop world. And I would plug into all the different labels in New York and LA, the Tommy Boys, the Def Jams, the Profile Records, the Priority Records, and get information from the contacts I was making there and put that into the newsletter.
That's dope. And then so obviously how the transition from being the newsletter at Harvard, which is innovative in itself, but then, a few years later, you got Chuck D calling it the Bible of hip hop, and you move from Harvard all the way to the big city in New York, and it takes off. Man, tell me about how did it go from just the newsletter to literally the Bible of hip hop?
Well, really early on, somebody gave me a book on the history of Rolling Stone magazine, which I didn't know anything about at the time, and really didn't know about the history of rock and roll music. And so I learned there was a lot of parallels between rock and roll and hip hop, and the way that Jan Wenner was a guy who started Rolling Stone. He started it as an underground newspaper, but throughout the 70s and 80s, it became like the preeminent voice of mainstream, pop culture in America. And he grew with his generation. And I said, well, that's the same thing I can do for hip hop,
right,
but it's going to be bigger because hip hop was being consumed by white, black, Latino, Asian, everybody.
Globally, yeah.
Rock was really, by that time of Rolling Stone, it was really just mainly white people music.
Yeah.
So I said, man, I can build a Rolling Stone of hip hop, and I just threw myself into that. I never went to class the last 2 years of college. I managed to graduate, got my degree, but it was all about trying to build up this business, turn it into a magazine. Did it all like with $200, just kept flipping it. Got some people like Monica Lynch from Tommy Boy Records was the president, and she gave me a year's worth of ad money up front when we were moving to New York, so that I would have some capital to actually start running the business out of New York City.
And so you just really went from Harvard and then just to New York, and you just found a building and said, this is where the Source is going to be.
594 Broadway in Houston in Soho. That was our home for many years. Found a little space. Used to be first there was 6, 8, 10 of us in one big room, kind of about as big as this, with telephone cords all going everywhere. And then we moved to a little bigger space, and the record company supported the Source because I built distribution to all the mom and pop record stores around the country. So in every city, whether you lived in Detroit, whether you lived in LA, whether you lived in Seattle or Houston, if there was a mom and pop store in your neighborhood back in those days where you would go to get the latest music and find out Source, I would ship them out magazines on consignment. They put it on their counter there, and they started selling like crazy, and that would all get back to the record labels, so the record labels would know, man, we need to support this because it's a really powerful vehicle to help us build hip-hop, make it bigger. So I got a lot of support those first few years from record labels to advertise, And then it became a thing. How can I bring this into the corporate world and begin to get the Nikes and all these companies interested in hip hop? Because in the early '90s, they didn't care about it at all. They didn't know what it was. They were scared of it. They didn't see where it was going.
Wow.
And so this, like you said, this is the golden era of hip hop. And, you know, I was a big part of kind of helping bring it into the mainstream, you know, through the corporate world and other things.
And you had the foresight, man, which is really impressive. But, I mean, and even so much so, man, we got to talk about, you know, the Unsigned Hype, because everyone from, you know, like you said, Eminem to DMX to Biggie, you know, all of these people, man, like, when did Unsigned Hype start? And then, you know, that process of really being a curator for some of the biggest names in the culture all came from, you know, your mind.
Yeah, well, I had, you know, a good team. We created what we called the Mind Squad. So the Source Mind Squad was like the editorial team. And, you know, this was a group of people, men and women, who many of whom have gone on to do incredible things in the media and entertainment worlds. But, you know, we loved hip hop, and it was just like, you know, we want to share our passion and our love for hip hop with the world, and, you know, take it really seriously. With Unsigned Hype, once we started printing an address in the magazine, we started getting demo tapes. People would just mail them in, you know, randomly, tapes showing up. And John Schechter had the idea to create a column to promote unsigned talent. And he handed it off to a guy named Matty C very early on. Matty C is the one who discovered Biggie, got the demo tape from Mr. C. You know, Puff had called me after we featured him in Unsigned Hype around the time he was getting his first deal for his label, and he was looking for rappers.
So Diddy called you directly?
Yeah, I had a relationship with Puff, you know, early on. I used to come down, even when I was at Harvard, I used to come down to New York with boxes of magazines, and I'd go up to all the labels and drop off magazines. So I would be at Uptown when Puff was just an intern there. Me and him had gotten friendly, and he loved the Source. So yeah, he called when they gave him his deal to start signing his own artists. And so I went down the hallway to Matty. I said, who do we got? And Matt was like, man, I got to bring in Biggie. This guy's incredible. And so Matty brought the demo tape, and Puff signed him like a few weeks later.
Wow.
But we also, you know, Matty also had DMX in Unsigned Hype very early on. Way
like
before.
DMX, he wrote a letter from jail, right? Or
yeah. There was some type of letter that showed up from jail, you know, pushing his stuff, and we ended up getting his demo tape. And this is like '91, like way before X blew up. He was in Unsigned Hype.
Wow.
Mobb Deep, you know, they were Poetical Prophets before they changed their name, but Matty had found them, put them in their Common, you know, his people.
Common
Sense at the time. Yeah, we got him his first record deal on Relativity Records. And so, yeah, that was, you know, just, you know, there were so many defining parts of the magazine that just became staples in the culture. Unsigned Hype being one, 5 mics, the ratings of the albums were taken so seriously by everybody.
How many, again, do you know off top, like how many albums got 5 mics? Is it still a...
I don't, so there's the original ratings, and then there were times like years later where we went back and said, you know what?
Oh, you had to go back because they proven to be classics.
Right.
You had to go give them their 5 mics.
And re-rate them.
Yeah.
And so there's a few of those, but it's probably maybe only like original 5 mics might be like 10 albums that got 5 mics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Source mic was a real thing, even so much too that you ended up creating the Source Awards. And then even when we talk about, you know, some of those Source Awards were like the most pivotal moments in hip hop in itself. I mean, specifically the 95 Source Awards, where that was when Andre 3000 got on the stage and said the South got something to say. Yeah. That was the, you know, in New York where Snoop Dogg said, you know, New York ain't got love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. And then, of course, the famous Suge Knight quote where you don't want your executive producer dancing all in the video. So that was one of those moments, and we hear so many stories of that night. Of really, it was just the tension was so high, but it's so interesting too to like. Even whether it's the Source Awards or Unsigned Hype, all these things that you've built, attempting to be a purveyor of the culture, and almost as a lot of people say, you know, as a guest in hip hop, you've had a great respect, and it's interesting because I want you to touch on it too, because growing up in DC and just really just being a young dude who just loved the culture and. Even, I mean, as you sit there next to your fiance, who's a black queen, I mean, tell me about the difference or the dichotomy, man, of like being a young white dude that's at Harvard or probably growing up, you know, from an affluent family, but still just loving this street culture, and then becoming, you know, somebody who's an integral part in all of it. Like having to balance that, man, that has to be difficult. Even, I mean, as you sit here to this day, because as we look at it, you know, we look at hip hop as black culture, or at least how it started, especially during the times that you were there, and then you were at the helm of it. Like, how did you deal with that? Like always being a white dude in a black world.
Sure. Well, I mean, it started early for me growing up in D.C., just going through the public school system. You know, back then before all the gentrification, D.C., you know, was Chocolate City.
Chocolate City.
And so, you know, very early on, I just kind of fell in love with the music and the culture of the city, you know, staying up late at night, listening to the radio and, you know, just getting into whether it was like soul or disco or R&B and go-go. You know, go-go really was the sound of the streets of D.C. for many, many years, and really, you know, in many
ways.
Out to
Chuck Brown and all of that.
Godfather,
Yeah, absolutely. Go-go's that vibe.
So just, you know, being like a basketball player when I was young, thinking I was going to make the NBA and, you know, going to the playground and, you know.
Young Jewish dude in the NBA.
You know, so I was used to being like the only white guy in a lot of circles for many years. My junior high and my high school were predominantly black schools. And, you know, most of my friends were black in those years. And so it was something that I just had become used to. And I was just really, you know, what hip hop kind of did is like open my eyes more to, you know, things like systemic racism out, you know, really, you know, like I can remember in the 80s, you know, hearing a KRS-One song where he talked about, you know, Columbus didn't discover America. And stuff like that really stuck with me because it's like common sense stuff. But it's like the world doesn't teach you that growing up, especially back then. Like you were taught Columbus discovered America, and you know, you don't talk about this whole civilization of people that were wiped out that lived here already. So that was the kind of stuff that really kind of sparked in my brain, listening to The Message, you know, Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel, you know, hearing that song and just the kind of you know, the passion and
the voice of the streets at the time,
and the reality of things. And again, being around and seeing that kind of stuff in DC. Now, hip hop, you know, was a way that kind of helped me put it all together to understand that hip hop could actually change the world and change a lot of these conditions, because it was bringing people like myself and others from different backgrounds together on one accord. Like, man, you know, this is, you know, we can really change this stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we're being told by, whether it's the media, politicians, teachers, is really a bunch of, you know, bullshit. And you know, we gotta change the narrative. And that's really, you know, what it became for me, and why I really dove into building The Source. You know, I was always an entrepreneur, so, you know, it was a business that I was excited about building, but I was even more excited when I understood like what it could do to change the world. And you know, that would just became my mission in life, and remains to be to this day.
Man, and I mean, your journey is so remarkable. And I mean, even as you sit here today, and I want to ask Brett too, like, just even one, first of all, how did you guys meet? But then two, like, what about, you know, Dave like struck you to be like, yo, this is somebody I want to rock with. This is someone I want to marry.
Yeah, yeah. I'll try and keep the meeting story brief, but at the time I was working for Oprah in Chicago, and this was in 2014, and I got sent to Ferguson, Missouri after Mike Brown was killed. And Dave was down there as well, and we all were just kind of part of the movement, the marches and the protests and all of that. And there was one day when a lot of journalists and reporters and just other people in media were outside the area where Mike Brown was killed, caution tape still up, and it was just a very moving moment. And I look a few feet over, and I see Dave, and we kind of give like this smile, but kind of like heartbreaking moment between us. And I guess the rest is kind of history from there. We just kind of kept in touch, and I think I got ready to leave Ferguson, if I'm not mistaken, right? And he kind of shyly called me over and asked for my phone number. And at the time, he was running Hip Hop Weekly, so he gave me a copy that I didn't ask for, and signed it "Long Live Hip Hop," which I still have. And I remember I was talking to my brother. He was checking on me. We're still in the middle of all these protests down there, and I said, I just met the most interesting guy. His name is Dave Mays, and he was like, "The Dave Mays?" Nah, in all honesty, I do not have a lot of knowledge of hip hop. I do now because of him, but I text him back, and I'm like, "Who's the Dave Mays?" And so he sent me like a Google link or something. I was like, "Oh, okay." And it still wasn't really registering for me. But we continued when we both got back to our respective cities. Chicago for me at the time, Atlanta for him. We just continued to keep in touch. And I think I was actually still with someone, and I think you were too. So we kept in touch as friends, and he'd check in and ask, or he'd say, "Oh, I saw the show you produced the other day," or, "I saw something you wrote the other day." And we just kind of kept in touch about work stuff and life stuff. And then after about 2 years, he came to Chicago. He was involved in was it a hip hop summit?
With Reverend Jackson.
With Reverend Jesse Jackson, and you invited me to come here. You speak and get an award, and we hadn't seen each other in the 2 years since we met. We hadn't seen each other, but I came over there and listened to his speech and saw him get an award. And afterward, he asked if I wanted to go out to dinner and just catch up since we hadn't seen each other in 2 years. And we both talked about the fact that we had broken up with our respective partners. And we really, you extended your trip in Chicago, and we started dating.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. We've been in a lot of different cities together. We've lived together. We haven't lived together. We've done long distance. We've done a lot of back and forth. But now we are in Chicago together.
That's dope. And putting on for the culture. Yeah. And really showing that. And that's the thing. Just Dave touching on your sincerity for hip hop, and like you said, from even you two meeting in Ferguson, to rally and support, Mike Brown. And all that's continuing to go on in the world today. What would you say is needed in hip hop currently, man? Because you really have been, since, you said since the 80s, you kind of been, a strong curator and presence, and especially in the space of journalism. So I would wonder, when you see today's state of hip hop, and when you see where all that's going on in the world, and now hip hop's voice is probably louder than ever. What do you feel like is needed, or that message to kind of hold true to it?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is being able to connect the dots across the generations, because hip hop as a community could be a lot more powerful if we were a little more united, but the music has kind of separated us. This narrative of this new hip hop, this new mumble rap isn't real hip hop, and that's been going on for years, the back and the forth between the older and the younger sides, dividing us. So you got a lot of people, in my age that grew up on hip hop, but now they're like, "Oh man, I don't listen to this shit no more."
Right.
But what I see is that whether or not a 21-year-old and a 51-year-old today like the same music, if they've both grown up on hip hop, they have a lot more in common in the way they feel about things going on in the world, their perspective, their worldview, the way you experience things going on. It's different from someone who hasn't grown up on hip hop.
Right.
And so that's like the common thread I'm trying to bring out is get people, through building this platform. I think we need leadership. We have a lot of amazing talents, but hip hop, in many ways, it's become a very commercialized, art form and culture, and it's about making money, which is important part of thing, but it's not everything. And I think we need leadership to help us organize and make change, because like you said, you look at what happened with Mike Brown and all the things still happening today from George Floyd on down. These are things that we were talking about in hip hop 30 years ago with NWA and fuck the police, and it's sad in a lot of ways that hip hop is now this multi-billion-dollar industry, but none of this stuff has changed. The problems in the inner city communities are as bad, if not worse, as they've ever been. And to me, that's just not cool. It's not, shouldn't be that way. So, we need to find a way to build, community, build our influence, and be able to organize to do more than just, make a bunch of money for some people, but really, do something that's going to change these conditions and empower the people.
And I have to say, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, you say, it's a billion-dollar industry now, and you came in it, from having that entrepreneurial spirit from Harvard and really built an empire yourself. But when you look at the likes of people that you probably, I mean, were your peers, or still are to some sense, but like when you watch Diddy, now being classified as a billionaire and all that he's built with all his platforms and outreach, when you watch Jay and like having being worth several $billions, and I mean, and everybody else from Nas, like everybody is really taking this step into the world of business and turned hip hop into a business. But then at the same time, there's this juxtaposition of doing it for the culture, and you have the people who, I mean, everybody's really successful, from the Drakes to the J. Coles to the Kendricks, but there still feels like there's this movement going on where everybody's looking to get to the bag, but then there's also like people who really want to be responsible about the messages in the music, and I feel like there's this energy going on where people want to not always glorify, the low frequency that may have actually gotten us all to a space where it's worth billions of dollars. But as it shifts, man, I mean, where do you find, or how do you see, like, all right, well, this is where Dave Mays was, a part of, that thing, the good and the bad, the issues and the problems, because, as the journey of the source, it was during the golden era where it was all about getting to the bag, and then now, as you build with Breakbeat, it's like, how are you a solution to kind of keep that purveyor of the culture around for a very long time?
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of everybody who's accomplished a lot in hip hop. All those guys. Like we said before, I knew them all when they were first getting started, and Jay-Z used to roll up to the Source office to like play me his new album, before it came out, and get feedback and stuff like that.
So Jay would pull up like what album did he play you? He's pulling up playing like
this was his. I'm pretty sure it was his second album that I remember
in my lifetime. But yeah.
After, because we showed a lot of love to what's the
Reasonable
first,
Doubt.
Reasonable Doubt, of course, classic. Now that's another one. I think we only gave 4 mics, and eventually
you had to go back and give it
re-rated
5.
to 5. No question. But yeah, it was after that I remember him. You know, I got a phone call one day, and I answered my phone. It's Jay-Z, and he's like, "Come downstairs." I'm like, "What?" I didn't know what was like. Was he mad? Because you know, a lot of people used to get mad at the Source back in those days. They didn't like their ratings, or they wanted to be on the cover. We didn't want to put them on the cover, so I had a lot of issues over the years. But so I go downstairs, and he's like, "Oh, come on, jump in." And I get in the whip with him. And he's like, I want to play this album, and so he played it to me, and I try to give him some good feedback.
That's how crazy is that you giving Jay-Z feedback on some classic joints. I mean, like you truly are like pivotal and intricate in the culture, and like you said, you ever look up and like, yo, this dude I'm riding was gonna be one of the richest men to ever touch hip hop.
I mean, I saw where we could take hip hop. I didn't know exactly who was going to end up where necessarily, but I definitely saw a lot of the talent and supported a lot of these guys in the early stages of their careers. And I had the vision. I think one of the most important things too that we need to think about is the music. Going back to the music, because the music and the type of music that's become commercialized, has been kind of dictated by the corporations. There's a handful of music corporations, international companies that control the music industry, and in my view have pushed certain agendas and certain things, certain styles of music over others. And we don't really need major labels these days. You can do it all independently, because of the internet and social media and so many things. And, so like when like a guy like Chance the Rapper, when he first came out and was having success, he was pushing that narrative a lot. Like he stayed independent. He didn't want to sign to no label. And, he was able to show like you could be independent, you could sell millions, you could go on tours and do it all from an independent standpoint. And I think that's kind of the model that we need to try to get back to and push more, so that we can eventually, control more of the narrative and the direction of the music.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the future of what your new endeavor, Breakbeat, which is already quite successful. What's next? What can we expect from Breakbeat and Dave Mays?
Well, first of all, we're gonna be doing some things with this amazing dude who's built himself a incredible empire already. Nick Cannon, my brother, looking to work with you and get you involved and helping us, take it to another level. We're going to keep expanding our roster of shows. Obviously very excited about the Suge Knight Collect Call show. And
that's been blowing up all over the place, man. I mean, like you guys dropping episodes every week. I mean, it's coming with a lot of heat though too. He's shaking things up. He pissing people off, man. You concerned again that you jumping right back into the world of controversy that you may have had to take a break from for a while?
No, I mean, I don't think, the first episode, Suge had stuff that he wanted to get off his chest, and he kind of addressed certain people that's caused a lot of uproar the last week or so. But that's not the goal of the show. As people continue to listen to the podcast on a weekly basis, you'll be able to hear a lot more of the content that we're putting out there. That's again more about trying to educate people on the history, so they can learn more accurately the history of hip hop, and also speak to the younger generation and offer knowledge and experiences and whatever guidance from what I've been through or what Suge's been through, the mistakes, the successes, everything. But the next phase or future of Breakbeat really is getting into the technology side and building a technology platform that the hip hop community can own and control, because we rely on all these technology companies, and they don't really look out for us. We're the ones that made YouTube successful. We're the ones that made Instagram cool. We're the ones that made all these tech platforms. Hip hop was the community that embraced these things early on and made them relevant.
Right.
But now they're these multi-billion-dollar companies, and a lot of cases they're actually shitting on us. I mean, you know, the stories I hear all the time from black creators about how they get screwed over by these platforms, the very small amount of money that you're making compared to what these companies are making. So my idea is like, look, we know that we have the power to create these technology platforms on a massive scale. So why don't we build one for ourselves that we can control and is going to continue to look out for our community and our culture. So expanding, you know, into that tech space and diversifying the content slate to the point where we'll be producing our own movies, our own TV series, our own documentaries. Again, we don't have to go to these, you know, third party companies and ask them to fund this or fund that. You know, when we know we got stuff that would be amazing, and you know, we don't need someone else's, you know, approval to get it made. So that's really the vision, is to create something that we can do all of that ourselves, and partner with, you know, people like yourself who not only, you know, have accomplished a lot, but are also really, you know, committed to building things and trying to do something that can be positive, along with, you know, building a financial, you know, empire.
Man, well, if anybody could do it, you can do it, and it's definitely truly innovative, man. And we look forward to the journey of Breakbeat. I look forward to, you know, working in the partnership that we building. I mean, your story is one of a kind. I mean, to talk about, you know, a young Jewish kid who grew up in D.C. and fell in love with hip hop, and, you know, went from Harvard to the most powerful man in hip hop is truly something that I feel like is almost like it's the tales that movies are made of. It's the things that we see on television and stuff, and it really only happens once in a lifetime. And for, as we all know, as students of hip hop and part of the culture, man, you're an intricate part of globalization, really, an intricate part of, you know, really.
Thank you.
If I could say, hip hop is probably the one thing that has brought the world closer together in this generation, at least. We all know the power of music. I always say, if there's one religion that really matters, it is the vibration of music, and then how hip hop has really just galvanized and just gathered the youth, and still, I mean, you were a young man in '86, and there's still kids today in 2023 that got that same energy, that are looking to be innovative, that are looking to. It's not about the color of their skin. It's not about, you know, where they grew up, but it's just like they all love this culture, this thing that we call hip hop. And, you know, it's a lot of people becoming extremely successful because of it, but it's a lot of people that lives are being saved, and communities are being uplifted because of this. So we appreciate you for all that you build and what you know brought to the culture, and what you'll continue to bring. And man, like I say, let's continue to get it. And I thank both you and Brett for sharing and having this conversation here on the Daily Canon as we go live on Twitch, and all the, you know, the new media that we're presenting, that, you know, I'm sure these clips will go viral. I'm sure that just your journey is really gonna inspire so many. So I even see,
Thank you.
in the chat, people are saying how it's just such a great story, and even my man Stimulator said just inspirational and great conversation. So I enjoyed it. I always enjoy talking to you. And, you know, we gonna keep rocking, man. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
No doubt. It's the Daily Canon. We gonna holla at y'all tomorrow. We out.